4 years before Albert Camus came out with the two major works that actually became the turning point of his career and very much of the career of the 20th century philosophy. In 1938, Jean-Paul Sartre publishes a book which starts to take philosophy a little bit away from the strong base that it had in Germany, from Nietzsche, from Husserl, from Heidegger, and of course, should never forget Kierkegaard, who started feeling out the sensation that man in the new world has to have a new role, and the new role has to be divided from the narrative of any kind of religion, from the narrative of God. God became less and less a figure in which you could trust. If Plato had a God, if Socrates had a God, if Socrates in the name of God decided to give his life up, that very God was put up in question in a very strong fashion and discarded to a degree at the end of the 19th century and then at the beginning of the 20th century, and especially by people like even Søren Kierkegaard, that who at the end of his career came back to God and found all the answers in God, which is a nice escape if you can decide that there is a reason for everything and that the reason is divine and that the reason has a beginning, a middle, and the end all in one, and that one is outside of the sphere of human beings, then that sphere, the divine sphere, offers you almost all the solace that the real life does not offer you. Heidegger did not go that way, and Jean-Paul Sartre, who in 1934 went to study in Berlin, actually brought with him a lot of the sense of German philosophy, the German mathematical philosophy, and he started bringing the existentialism to the front. Existentialism as in, how can I define myself if not through the way society defines me? How can I look at myself directly at the mirror and judge myself only by what I see and not by the mirror itself? What do I see in a mirror? And his work, Le Nausée, Nausea, that came out in 1938, was a breakthrough, because a great work of philosophy, Der Mann ohne Eigenschaften, the man without qualities, never became famous enough, never became strong enough. And because of that, an outstanding writer like Robert Musil was never understood as the grand thinker that he was. But if we take, I don't know if you are familiar with the works of Robert Musil, and especially the Man Without Qualities. Hi, Shula, nice to have you here with us. It's good to see old friends. And Robert Musil had an idea a second. Every sentence in The Man Without Qualities is an idea. It builds a narrative, but it's a narrative of ideas. The man himself doesn't do anything. The Ulrich, the protagonist of The Man Without Qualities, passes his life watching what is happening and is trying very hard not to play a part. And the fact that he does not play a part allows Musil to charge each and every phrase, each and every word almost, with an incredible sense, with an incredible profundity. And that profundity is not found in any other book. To a certain degree, it's much stronger even than Also sprach Zarathustra of Nietzsche, because there is no story in The Man Without Quality. There are only the fights of ideas to prove themselves. And the two ideas that lead that book are the idea that lose out from the beginning. The big idea of the big campaign between the German Kaiser and the Austrian Kaiser, completely useless and senseless campaign that actually is almost a kind of, I would say, an Ariadne thread that allows the reader always to come back to something completely absurd that is taking place, because it's something completely senseless. And the whole idea is to give the sense of the grandeur of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And the book was written, obviously, in the years that that empire was no longer. It was written between 1921 and 1942, the year that Musil died. And 1932 finds a young man from, he's a Pied Noir, Blackfoot, which is the way that the French colonialists were called, the French people that were born in the conquered French colonies in northern Africa. So Albert Camus, son of a poor agriculturer, is born in 1913, and at the age of 1 year, he loses his father in the First World War. His childhood is very, very tough, very, very difficult. He is every day on the border of hunger and on the border of physical danger, because it's the beginning where the French Pied Noir were not seen very nicely. His only luck was that a priest found him to be outstandingly intelligent and ahead of everybody else and sent him to a school. But that only happened when he was 13, and until that age he actually lived with his grandmother, because his mother was almost deaf and almost blind and couldn't work, and food was not a given. Food was always a struggle. I would like to start this evening, this intimate meeting of minds, by asking ourselves a question. All the work of Camus is a work that is based on the realization of being an outsider in a place which man feels he should know and he should be an insider. And from that, of course, he went to the big works that earned him the Nobel Prize for Literature. He's almost the youngest winner of the Nobel Prize, but for Rudyard Kipling, who won it when he was a year younger. But it's not a very nice record to hold, but he holds the record of the shortest lived Nobel Prize winner. he died 18 months after he won the prize. And he died in a very brutal and aggressive way. He was driving together with a friend of his, a book publisher. They were driving in a car on a straight road, but they were driving at 120, 130 miles an hour, almost 200 kilometers an hour. And the car just left the road, and they both died. And what I'd like to ask ourselves in the beginning of this meeting is, let's try and remember the last time that we were in an environment that was supposed to be known to us. And I'm not talking about dreams, I'm talking about being awake. An environment that we know everything about, an environment that we have an intimacy with, and an environment that proves to us all of a sudden, in a surprise, that we are outsiders. L'étranger in French holds a lot of meanings, and it's a very reductive way to translate it into English as the stranger. The outsider is much more like it. Let's see, when is the last time that each and every one of us found himself an outsider not in a new society, but as I said, in a society that we actually thought we knew well, thought we were accepted. How many times, or when was the last time that we felt we don't belong here? In a place that we grew up being told that this is where we belong. It's an open question. I'd like to break up here and allow each and every one of us to think and participate. It happens all the time, Shula, is what Camus would later, in actually the same year, he published both L'étranger, the outsider, and Le mythe de Sisyphe, the myth of Sisyphus. Both are incredibly profound and world-changing works, but both together don't come up to 300 pages. The Stranger, or L'étranger, or The Outsider, in French comes up to 180, 170, something like that. And Le mythe de Sisyphe is an essay of 120 pages. But the main thing is, the man that finds himself completely detached. Let's relate this to our lives. What I was going to say, Shula, it happens all the time. This is what Camus in Le mythe de Sisyphe is trying to say, is only a way not to be faced with the acknowledgement of the absurd. The definition of the absurd he found in Le mythe de Sisyphe in the earlier works of writers like, let's say, Dostoevsky, but in the later works, in the Brother Karamazov, there's the shadow of the hope. And a work of art of the absurd never judges. In other words, he calls us not to judge Meursault, not to judge the protagonist of The Outsider, and by not judging, to accept also not to offer neither the reader nor the protagonist any shadow of hope. Why did this become the most well-known French work of literature or philosophy to the English public. In the early 1960s, The Guardian asked about 500 representatives of the intelligentsia of England who or what was the book or the writer that changed their lives, and 85% said L'étranger of Camus. Interesting, 58% of the women and almost 100% of the men. I don't know how to read it. It's just yeah, okay, Shula. This is exactly. I would suggest that we write to everyone so that we can share. Shula says Dostoevsky, God is the solution. Dostoevsky, God is the escape. The God of Dostoevsky is a very abstract God. It's a little bit like the God of Husserl, the teacher of Heidegger. It's an idea. The God is an idea. It's not a function. It's not something that, like, in the forms of Plato, we talk about the perfection of forms because we know that the perfection comes from the gods, comes from the divinity. Modern writers, especially in the later part of the 19th century, started differentiating themselves from the idea of the God Almighty, God the Savior. And whenever God is used in the beginning, let's say, even with if we talk about not Dostoevsky but the big man, the big old man Tolstoy, in the beginning his belief in God was a lesser factor than his belief in his brother human beings. He believed that his serfs had the right to be free human beings. They, of course, did not want to be all of a sudden relieved of all the possibility to blame others for their hardship, etc., etc. And so they said, no, we have God, and under God we have the Tsar, and under the Tsar we have the Count, Tolstoy. And only after that we have our daily work. In the work of the absurd, we are again and again met with man that lives the absurdity. What is the absurdity? What is the big thing that we always say? Tomorrow will be better. When we have a difficult day, we don't say, it's not difficult, it's the best day we ever had, no matter what. No, we bring ourselves to be in the arena of yesterday as seen through the eyes of the not yet achieved tomorrow. And this is exactly the absurd, because tomorrow, which is going to be a much better day than today, of course, we're going to be so much closer to death. And the absurd is talking about the man living in the hope that tomorrow will be better, but tomorrow brings the enemy so much closer into the house. Tomorrow brings you so much closer to death. And in order to live in the world of absurdity, there are two choices, according to Albert Camus. One choice is to live for tomorrow, even though the tomorrow brings no promises. And the only thing that is good about tomorrow is that it's not today. So we can paint it in any kind of color we want. It's not the gray that is sprinkled on our irises by the very power of what's happening here and now. And the here and now, of course, is the proof for Albert Camus that man lives the battle, and until he, the last lines, the beautiful last lines of Le Mythe de Sisyphe go, we have to understand that after he does this day in, day out, in other words, after every day, you remember what Sisyphus had to do. He had to push up a boulder, a huge stone up the mountain, and then leave it there and run down, and the boulder, the huge rock, tumbled down right after him, and he had to push it up again. And then it tumbled down, and he had to push it up again. Camus builds Sisyphe into a fighter, into a rebel that says, this is what I have to do, so I'll do it again and again and again. And at the end of Le Mythe de Sisyphe, he comes with an incredible line, because Sisyphus is happy. In other words, Sisyphus cannot see himself doing anything else. So he understands that in order for the absurd to keep prevailing, the absurd needs a man. Because without man, there is no absurd. Let's go back to the point that I raised earlier about being detached, finding ourselves in a place where we thought we could belong. What happens to us when we feel we don't? What is the first thing that we want to do? Do we want to break it up? Do we want to escape? Do we want to hide? What is the first thing we want to do? Come on, let's think. Let's put ourselves into that. Let's close our eyes for a while. And, you know, for some people, it's this idiotic surprise party for their 25th anniversary or something they knew nothing about, and they come home to a dark flat, and all of a sudden the lights come up, and ha ha ha, happy birthday. Or for other people, it's the day that they learn that something they believed in is doing exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to do. Leave? What do you mean leave, Shula? Can you please explain it a little bit more? Leave, okay, as a solution. Okay, if we are confronted with alienation, do we have to actually leave in order to not to feel alienated? If we leave, we give in to alienation. If we stay and start trying to make the alienated environment congruous to us, might we not be able to change it? Those are questions. I don't have answers, as you know. Okay, Shula says you can't leave life, can you? This is exactly the point of Le Mythe de Sisyphe. This is exactly the point of Camus. Camus says, if, well, not if, given that life is senseless, that man always says tomorrow will be better, but tomorrow brings death so much nearer. Does this realization allow people to commit suicide? That's what Le Mythe de Sisyphe is all about. And his answer is, who, by the way, read L'Étranger here? Okay, Cornelia did, and Nira did, and Shula, did you read it? Shula doesn't have a microphone today. Well, you learn to accept. I did. Yes, okay. Of course, you learn to accept is something that Camus will not allow. In his works, Camus is not an acceptor. He will say again and again, man is a factor. Okay, you read it, fine. Uh, in Camus' work, man is always a factor. He's not a good factor or a bad factor. He's not positive or negative. He's just is. Um, in his works, his first work, the thing that we are actually talking about here today, the L'étranger, he does not live up to his promise, because at the end of L'étranger, we have more than a shadow of hope. We have almost the realization that the life of the free Meursault, the protagonist, the life of the man that lived for the second, for the moment, that only accepted things that he could experience here and now and immediately. Our cats and dogs are having a fight here, so I guess they're talking about absurdity or something, or existentialism. The thing in my menagerie is that the dog is an existentialist and the cats are absurdists. So there's a fight going on between them all the time, and the dog always gives in and just comes and licks them and kisses them, and then everything is okay. What I wanted to try to do here today is jump with both legs into L'étranger, into the book, and I invite you. No Buddhist in the house? I don't know. Maybe the neighbors. I don't know. No, I don't think we have a Buddhist among our animals here. No, I don't think so. Anyhow, L'étranger, the book that he wrote it in 1941. It was published in 1942, together with Le Mythe de Sisyphe. The name Meursault, by the way, was written differently before. It was written without the mur. It was written M-E-R, Mersol, with S-O-L. And so it had the connotation of sea and sun, la mer, le soleil. The story of the beginning is very, very simple. One thing that I'd like to go back and mention here is when Camus was 23 or 24, he said, one lives with a few familiar ideas, 2 or 3. By the chance of worlds and men who are encountered, one polishes them and transforms them. It takes 10 years to have an idea fully one's own, about which one can talk naturally. This is a little discouraging. But in this way, man gains a certain familiarity with the beautiful face of the world. Up to that point, he looked at it face to face. But then he has to step to the side to gaze at its profile. A young man looks at the world face to face. He hasn't had time to polish the idea of death and nothingness, the horror of which, however, he has tasted. This he wrote about the time he came to Paris in 1937-38, and we'll see that really, although a man of incredible, profound integrity of philosophical thinking, he never gives up on those three basic ideas. As I said earlier, if we read Robert Musil, he's not a preacher of anything. He's a raconteur. He tells you the great ideas, and he makes you think about a spectacular amount of ideas, each and every one completely different than the other. Ideas that go into what is the meaning of life, what is the meaning of money, what is the meaning of man, what is the meaning of love, what is the meaning of everything. Camus, no. Camus is profoundly engaged in his 1, 2, 3, in those very basic forms. And the basic form for Camus is 1, everything is senseless. 2, agree and accept senselessness. 3, live without hope. But if you want to keep living, you have to rebel. You have to revolt. And this is what he will do in his book, Rebel. In Le Mythe de Sisyphe, he's talking about suicide. In The Rebel, he's talking about murder. But he doesn't go away from those. I would like tonight to start reading the book in French. I will stop every once in a while and explain, but not like others who can be quite easily translated, although nobody really comes to mind. As a deep philosopher to be easily translated means that he has to be a very bad writer, and there were some very good philosophers and bad writers. But although Camus' language is very straightforward, reduced to the bone, but every word has its power. The book begins, aujourd'hui maman est morte, ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas. J'ai reçu un télégramme de la ville, mère décédée, enterrement demain, sentiment distingué. Cela ne veut rien dire. C'était peut-être hier. Today, mother is dead. Or maybe it was yesterday. I have no idea. Well, I got that telegram from the home saying, mother dead, funeral tomorrow, distinguished sentiments. Well, this means nothing at all. I think it must have been yesterday. La ville de Villars est à Marengo, à 80 km d'Alger. Je prendrai l'autobus à 2 heures. J'arriverai dans l'après-midi. The home is in Marengo, which is about 80 kilometers from Alger. I will take the 2 o'clock bus so that I can be there for the wake at night and be back tomorrow night. I would ask for 2 days off. Je demandais 2 jours de congé à mon patron, et il ne pouvait pas me le refuser avec une excuse pareille. And he couldn't say no with such an excuse. He n'avait pas l'air content. He didn't have this kind of air of satisfaction about him. Je lui ai même dit, ce n'est pas de ma faute. And I even felt like saying, but it's not my fault. Il n'a pas répondu, but he didn't reply. Je pensais alors que je n'aurais pas dû lui dire cela. And then I thought, I shouldn't have said that. Now, what is Merceau doing here? What are we talking about? What do we as readers get from those first lines? That the details are very important. Truth, reality have no place here at all. A very simple sentence like, mother died today, mean nothing because maybe she died yesterday. And all of a sudden, he doesn't leave it alone. He studies it. I received this telegram from the home. Mother died, but this means nothing. When did she die? he doesn't leave it alone, but at the same time, does he transfer to us any feeling at all? Or does he only transfer to us details, facts? He's immediately detached of feelings and immediately, yes, Nira, okay. You don't want to speak, Nira?
No, sorry, I just pressed it.
Okay,
Didn't mean it.
that's fine.
I don't know how to take it off. Okay.
Okay. Um, so in the beginning, immediately, we are brought into close connection to a detached and a strange reality. He talks very little about the fact that his mother died. He talks immediately about everything besides, about the home. We understand immediately that she didn't die at home. She died in a house, in a home for the old. He immediately has in mind that he is going to ask for 2 days off from his boss, and he sees that, and he tells us, it's very important that we know that his boss doesn't believe him, and he blames himself for being taken and put into a situation where he sits in the corner and feels like a child because the boss doesn't say anything, but he looks at him. Now, that's the first feeling that we really have here, the feeling of somebody who is embarrassed because he feels, although he says he tells the truth, he feels as if he has to prove it. And what does it say? Ce n'est pas de ma faute. This is not my fault. Nothing to do with me. I didn't kill her. It doesn't say it yet. But let's see how it builds from there. En somme, je n'avais pas à m'excuser. Well, then I understood I had nothing to excuse myself about. C'était plutôt à lui de me présenter ses condoléances. Mais il le fera sans doute après-demain, quand il me verra en deuil. But he will probably present me his condolences after tomorrow when he will see me in my black clothes. Pour le moment, c'est un peu comme si maman n'était pas morte après l'enterrement. Au contraire, ce sera une affaire classée et tout aura revêtu une allure plus officielle. He says, right now, he must feel like I must feel. He, meaning the boss, the patron, must feel that it's not really true that mother is dead. Because nothing is official yet. But after the funeral, and after everything has taken its right place, in other words, after society has put a line above a life by putting it under that line, by burying it, that funeral makes the death formal, official. And once things are official, you don't have to relate to them with feelings anymore because you have to relate to them as facts. Where does he take it from here? Immediately we go into the bus. He doesn't give us 1 minute to look out, to listen to the birds, to see if it's a nice day or a bad day. No. J'ai pris l'autobus à 2 heures. I took the bus at 2 o'clock. Il faisait très chaud. Now immediately we come under the heavy load of the day by day. Sisyphe is starting to push the stone up, up, up the hill. Il faisait très chaud. It was very hot. J'ai mangé au restaurant chez Céleste. Comme d'habitude, I ate at the restaurant by Celeste, as usual. Celeste as a name, not as the blue color. Il avait tout beaucoup de peine pour moi et Céleste m'a dit, he felt very bad and he told me, on n'a qu'une mère, One has but one mother. Quand je suis parti, ils m'ont accompagné à la porte, and when I left, and this shows us that this is not the way it happens every day, Celeste goes with Mercier to the port, to the door. J'étais un peu étourdi parce que il a fallu que j'ai monté chez Samuel pour lui encombrer une cravate noire et un brassard. He said, I didn't feel too good about this because I was losing time. I had to go to Emmanuel, to this friend of mine, who would give me a black tie, because obviously I did not have one, but he lost somebody earlier, so he does have a black tie. All the elements, all the details. J'ai couru pour ne pas manquer le départ. I had to run, not to miss the bus. Cette hâte, cette course, c'est à cause de tout cela, sans doute, ajouté au chaos. And he gives himself again a reason. He puts up his hand and say, what could I do? I had to run. It was very hot. I lost time. I felt bad. Everything but I feel loss. No, he does not feel loss, and he does not allow us to show any empathy to him. So, he says, all this brings a lot of chaos. À l'odeur d'essence, à la réverbération de la route et du ciel, que je me suis assoupi. And he says, with all that chaos, with all that running, with the heat, with the way that the bus moved all the time, and with the breathing in of the fumes of the solar, of the diesel, I fell asleep. And I slept almost during the whole trip. J'ai dormi pendant presque tout le trajet. Et quand je me suis réveillé, j'étais tassé contre un militaire. And when I woke up, I was leaning against a soldier. Et qui m'a demandé si je venais de loin. And that soldier was very nice, and he opened up a conversation which was closed immediately. Je dis oui. He asked me, are you coming from far away? And I answered yes, pour n'avoir pu parler, so that I wouldn't have to talk anymore. L'asile était à 2 kilomètres du village. The home is 2 kilometers from the village. Je fais le chemin à pied, but I walk. Je voulais voir maman tout de suite. I wanted to see mother immediately, mais le concierge m'a dit qu'il fallait que je rencontre le directeur. But the concierge, the guardian, told me that first of all I'll have to talk to the director. And here, for the next 8 or 9 pages, the main story is no longer the mother that died. It's no longer the fact that she died yesterday or today. It's no longer the fact whether he is going to get his 2 days off from his boss or not. The next 8 or 9 or 10 pages will be a conversation between the concierge, his wife, and Merceau. Concierge is a Parisian who came to Alger and found this job. He is very insistent that he is not retired, because the retired are the old people themselves. And although he's 67 years old, he's not yet retired. So it's very important that he is here because of a job and not because of his age or because of disability or because he has nothing else to do. And all of a sudden, we start to understand that Merceau wants to indulge in everything that is happening now so that he can push aside anything that engages him into something he's not willing to do. Can we come up with a, again, it's very important that we find ourselves in a situation like that, in a situation where we're not exactly detached, but we live as if we do not belong. We feel a very strong feeling that we're in a place that has rules that we're supposed to know, but we ignore those rules. We don't really know them. Can we find that? Can we think of a situation like that? Can we think of a corner we passed in our lives, and as we turned the corner, we found ourselves not in that play yard that we expected, or in that park, but all of a sudden, that park or that play yard was there, but it wasn't the same. Of course, we have Thomas Mann in The Little Herr Friedman describes something very, very similar, although in a much more romantic way and much more Thomas Mann way. The kleiner Mr. Friedman, the little Mr. Friedman, worked all his life with dreams about what he's going to do when he's going to be retired. He's a small manager in a small bank, and he puts all his money aside for the big trip that he's going to undertake when he retires. And he reads about all those beautiful, incredible places, Venice and Florence and all over Italy. And he knows everything about it. He reads and he consults maps. And now he's 50. He takes an early retirement, and he puts on his best clothes, and he takes his little suitcase, and he goes on the train, and he gets to Florence. And he gets off the train, and he looks around, and everything looks exactly like it was described in the book, but it looks so much less than what he, Mr. Friedman, thought it was going to be. And then he goes to Venice, and everything is fantastic. Everything is exactly like it was described. Yet it's not that. It's not the Venice of his imagination. It's not the Venice of his heart. It's not the Venice of his dreams. The big difference, of course, with between der kleine Herr Friedman, little Mr. Friedman, and Meursault, is that Mr. Friedman is thinking all the time and allows his imagination to be 2 steps ahead of him, and allows the confrontation of his imagination of reality with reality, whether the reality becomes less or more because of the way he prepared for it, is for us readers to proactively decide. But Meursault needs the minute. Meursault needs reality to throw itself in his face. So although he wants to go and see Mother immediately, he will spend half an hour or more with the concierge just to talk. And he will then spend more time, waste more time with the director. And again, with the director, he gives us this feeling that he has something to say, excuse me for. He has something to repent. We never understand what it is. He always sent money to his mother. He couldn't afford more. Through the whole book, what we see happening again and again and again is a very detailed description of everything. It goes even much more so in the second part of the book. The first part of the book is concerned with mother died. After mother died, he comes back. He meets Marie, who used to be a colleague of his and who left work a couple of weeks earlier. And he doesn't understand how, but they become lovers very, very fast. And Raymond, a friend of his, asked him to write a letter inviting a Berber, an Arab girl, to come for dinner. And all this is an excuse to have the girl so that Raymond can make love to her one last time and beat her up because she betrayed him, he says. And Meursault has no problem with that. And he does that. And he invites her. And after that, they all go out to Raymond and Marie and Meursault, go to a friend on the beach. And after the ride, they find the Arabs, the brothers and a cousin of the girl. And one of the Arabs takes out a knife and kills Raymond. And he follows Meursault. And Meursault, who now has the gun that he took from Raymond, so Raymond will not be pushed to do something illogical and kill the girl or kill her brother. But he finds himself now with a gun that Raymond had. And here is an incredible description because it's the first time that we are engaged emotionally. We're engaged emotionally because the sun is directly in our eyes, because we look through the eyes of that completely transparent being of Meursault. And we look through his transparent eyes, and through those transparent eyes we are blinded by the sun that is strongly into our eyes. And then we hear a shot, and Meursault realizes that he killed the Arab, and the Arab falls down, and he shoots him 4 more times. And that's more or less the end of the first part. And the second part will be the trial and the time in jail. During the trial, again, we will see that Meursault describes in minutiae everything that is happening and all the furniture in the courtyard, but he never gives us this feeling that he actually is awake, that he's actually taking things in. And when the judge asks him, why? Okay, I can understand maybe the first shot, maybe it was you were trying to defend yourself. But why did you shoot him 4 more times? And the only thing that Meursault can think of saying is, but what difference did it make to him? He was dead already. He never tries even to explain himself. He uses a kind of a absurd sense to answer something that he all of a sudden paints as an absurd question. What difference does it make if I shot him 5 times or 1 time? His plea, not his plea, but the plea of his lawyer, who is not very convinced because his lawyer also doesn't understand what he's all about. And the lawyer for the offense is actually building the case through his not feeling anything about the death of his mother, not so much about the Arab. We never know what the Arab's name is. There's no relationship between a human being, between somebody who has a sister, and we know he has a sister because the sister is the trigger, so to speak, of the whole événement, of the whole event. But we don't know whether he has a family, whether his death means hunger for somebody. His death is of no issue. The only issue is the son, it happened, that's it, I shot him. End of story. And only when he is in jail, we will see in our next meeting how slowly Merceau, Sisyphus, is building his routine. And he becomes almost happy with his routine, although he has no longer the ability to go out whenever he wants. He has no longer the ability to find his pleasure with Marie, although it's a pleasure that he could find whenever he wanted it. It was brief and to the point. All that is taken from him now. And with that, he feels is his responsibility taken. And the only thing that is left for him to do is to fight the fight of the not outsider, of the outcast. And he builds a new reality, the reality of the absurd that will find so much more to say, although maybe not as strongly as here in La Peste, the plague, and of course in the other big book that he wrote, La Chute, the fall. The sense that human being is born to create the mirror for the senseless world, for the senseless life, for the fact that there is no way tomorrow is going to be better than today, because tomorrow we're going to be so much closer to death. And we human beings are very strong in being able to live as if there is no death. And every time we meet death, it seems to surprise us. And if we meet somebody who is not surprised by death, even if it's a death that he initiated, where he was the doer, the culprit, means nothing to him, because death is in the way of everything. And we'll finish here by saying the word that Camus said in Le Mythe de Sisyphe. He said, life is not about the great life. Life is about the longest life. And with those difficult words, I'd like to finish here, but I invite all of you to please think about being an outsider. And think about being an outsider in the world of Camus. In other words, without having to be judgmental, because the absurd creation is never passing on a judgment. It just describes. And on the other hand, okay, the next meeting about Camus and his L'étranger is next Saturday. This is to answer Cornelia and everybody else. This week, I promise not to be so lazy as I was last week, because I was full with other things, and I really apologize. This week, I promise that I actually will send out a newsletter with invitations and a description, and also, obviously also with a link to the outstanding meeting we had here Thursday with Ton Koopman. But I'll briefly go into the meetings this week. This week on Tuesday, we'll have a Schubertiade, and this time we'll go with the violin works of Schubert, and we'll listen to some of the violin works of Schubert, violin and piano. Thursday, we'll have an evening where with Beethoven and Shostakovich. We'll hear two movements of Shostakovich and two movements of Beethoven, and we'll try to figure out the common denominator, the diversity, and above all, the complexity of genius. And next Saturday, we'll have another meeting here with L'étranger and Albert Camus. I'd be very glad if you reread it, especially if you can have the French text with you. I'd be more than glad to send it to you if you want. I have it scanned, the whole book in French. And if you want, I can email it to you. Yes, go ahead, Cornelia. I'm going to unmute you so you can.
Oh, so thanks. I wanted to say that if you can send that book to me in French because I don't have it, that would be great.
Okay. Okay. I'll email you the. I'll email you the scan.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it'll be very interesting if you could read a little bit of the Le Mythe de Sisyphe, either in whatever language you have it, because as far as I know, it was always translated quite well. It was translated into English quite nicely, and I believe also, I don't know obviously I don't know the Romanian translation, but I believe it shouldn't be too bad because I know that there were a lot of very important researchers in Romania of the absurd and of the work of.
I remember The Stranger is very nice in Romanian. I don't remember the Myth of Sisyphe. I can't say it. But The Stranger is very nice translate.
And what I would suggest also is a thought, if not a push to read, because it'll take time. I thought about the world that we encounter. Who has seen En attendant Godot, Waiting for Godot, by Samuel Beckett? Or who heard about it? Who read it? It's a play of...
heard about it, but no, didn't see it.
Okay. Just a very short story. Shula read it. Okay, great. The play, Waiting for Godot, is a story about 4 people. Okay, you saw the play. Fantastic. It's a story about 4 people that come to a tree in the middle of nowhere and have all kind of stupid, unbelievably complicated games while they are waiting for somebody who will definitely not come. They're waiting for Godot. Many, many years ago, right about the time that Magellan was going on his journeys, I was doing a drama course in, I was actually putting out a play in a jailhouse in Israel. It was a jail of maximum security where only murderers and terrorists were held, next to Haifa. And I chose to put up, because I was very young and obviously believed in myself and in everything else, I decided to enact En attendant Godot in jail. And the director of the jail was very, very he was not very happy with it, and I had to have a lot of help from people that were known in Israel and thought that it might be a good idea. But this is not the story. The story is that, first of all, the prisoners found no difficulty at all in understanding and living the absurdity of waiting for Godot. And in the opening, where everybody was very, very nervous, because if you know Samuel Beckett, his plays are not the easiest. And before the play started, there was a little riot. Everybody was, I can't remember, it was something that they did not get to eat at lunch that day, and there was a riot. I mean, a riot where people were taking all the branches and breaking them one on the head of the other, and all of a sudden, and I was very much afraid that nothing was going to happen beyond that riot. And then all of a sudden, you know, the actor came out and said, like I told him to do in the French way of knocking with his baton on the stage, and he did it, and then he said, waiting for Godot, it's like waiting for your next life sentence in jail. And I never told him that line, and I don't know where he took it from. And all of a sudden there was silence, and the whole play went through, and at the end, everybody started screaming and coming on stage and saying, do it again, we want to do it with you. It was incredible. And they understood the waiting like nobody else. And I didn't even think about it, because for them, waiting is life. It's waiting to be out. It's waiting for the next opportunity. It's waiting for the next opportunity to do something that will send you back to jail. So if you could please put all those things together in preparedness for our next meeting here. And I promise that by Monday latest, you will all get what should we call it, the newsletter. And in the newsletter will be a link to the full text of L'étranger in French. Okay? Anybody wants to take us on a trip of absurdity? No absurd corners to pass today. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us again here at Sophia, where minds meet online. Bye-bye, Shula. I'm really very, very happy to see you again with us, and I'm very glad to be able to pass another evening of meetings of minds. And I'm hoping that slowly, slowly, those minds will start having a voice, and we will come to a conversation rather than a kind of a frontal lecture. I find myself feeling like I thought I was not going to feel again after 40 years of not being in front of students anymore. Not 40, I'm exaggerating, of course, but close to 30. And anyhow, thank you very much for being with us here at Sophia, where minds meet online. And yours and mine and many more minds are waiting for the next meeting. Thank you and bye.